All right. Let me take a few Discord questions. We really have to leave really soon, but we'll get to a few more things. We have one or two pieces of sound to say, but I couldn't transition to them after such an incredible thing. I just want to let you guys know we're out of time for bad this week, guys. Next week, bad will be Samantha B. So stay tuned. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, yeah. I think you called in, Daniel. Winnipeg Greg, strictly theoretical question. What would Joshua suggest as a strategy for someone who's trying to force Michael to cover more Canadian politics? I did a whole fucking stream with my friend David Dole. What more do you want? Jesus Christ. Maybe First Nations issues.
Yeah. Actually, that's the answer, I think.
Yes.
And if I have, of the three stories that I wish we had time to tell, if I only had to pick one,
yes,
one is connected to Canada. It's a Canadian story.
Tell a quick story.
Okay. So there were several stories that I wanted to say in the main show, but if there's one I have to land on, and it's actually, I don't know if you can still pull up the picture, Matt. It's picture image number 8. So in Canada, there is the world's largest open pit strip mine. It's the size of the state of Florida.
Jesus Christ.
A strip mine the size of the state of Florida. And it is to extract tar sands oil, which is the dirtiest oil on the planet. Just in order to extract it, you have to use so many barrels of water and natural gas just to get it out of the ground. So I spent many years campaigning around the tar sands from a variety of strategies. One of those campaigns was that we targeted the Royal Bank of Canada for their funding of all of these tar sands projects. It was basic. You could call it a divestment campaign. It's not technically divestment, but we were getting Royal Bank of Canada to pull all of their investments from the tar sands. At the time, this is like 2011. In that year, they had invested $2.3 billion in the project. And of course, this is all on Indigenous territory. It's in Alberta, Canada, which is like the Texas of Canada. No offense to Alberta.
Or Texas.
Yeah, I
David,
guess I wanted
Jesus
to say
Christ.
Texas.
Yeah.
Calm
down,
No
DG.
offense to anybody. Don't get mad at me on YouTube.
How about fuck Alberta and fuck Texas? How about that? Yeah.
But it's fundamentally an affront to Indigenous rights and sovereignty, to the environment, to clean water, no matter what issue you care about, whether it's housing, whatever, it's a disaster. So we had been campaigning for years against the Royal Bank of Canada. The CEO, his name was Gordon Nixon. And in the framework that I described earlier, when we talk about target setting, the target was Gordon Nixon, the CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada. He is the single person who has the decision-making authority to pull their investments. We were getting nowhere. He didn't care. We didn't have enough power. We needed to change the relationship of power. We needed to move the rock, so to speak, from, I don't know if you listened to the main show, but...
They did. They get
but
it.
You should.
They get the rock analogy.
So what we started to do was search for other options. And so we looked at secondary targets. These are who has influence over him. And we found out that his wife, Janet Nixon, had a public profile where she was written up in all of these magazines as initiating this she's like a clean water enthusiast. She's has this blue water project.
Mr. Nixon was God damn it, the fucking water shit.
Right? But they loved it. As their husband and wife do it, all of the big papers in Canada, Maclean's, all of them would write up articles about he's conservative and she's liberal and they're married and there's this company and it's so there's a liberal logic of a wet dream to that
Matt,
thing.
my
right?
board, please.
So,
say, baby, put down that pipe and get my pipe up.
All right, yes.
So going after people's your target's family is complicated in a campaign. But because there's real tactics of a house demonstration or whatever, which we could talk about another time. But because she had a public profile, we're cool, she's fair game. We're going after your wife.
Right.
And so we developed a series of escalating tactics called Please Help Us, Mrs. Nixon. And so it was a 3-month, it was a series of tactics for 3 months in Canada. in it started in Toronto, where we started with kind of a culture jamming media campaign, where we had graffiti artists and a number of like wheat pasters and stuff, who all around the city put up billboards that said, "Please help us, Mrs. Nixon." And we quickly learned that in order to get them to stay up, we needed to build an alliance with the Garbage Workers Union. And so we had this huge base of environmentalists, and we made an agreement with them that we would show up to their next like arbitration agreement and support them on a particular picket line that was coming up the following month if they didn't tear down our signs.
Brilliant.
And so they didn't. So because they stayed up there and all the other random like wheat paste and stuff was getting torn down, it became part of this like local media narrative through Toronto. And the media story was like, what is this Please Help Us Mrs. Nixon thing? Is it like a new Hollywood movie coming out? Is this like an interesting guerrilla marketing campaign? And we had an inside person in the company of RBC who we had no traction with, was not responding to any of our pressure tactics until this point, started to forward us emails that they, just from that alone, started to freak out. They even flew up a like old retired executive to like consult with them on being like, what is this media thing that's coming out? And it like really got under the CEO's skin. All it said was, "Please help us, Mrs. Nixon." No context, no mention of the issue, nothing. And so we kept building that up and building. We also let them know that we were targeting them directly. So there's a country club that we found out that they went to. They have a particular gated community. We put flyers that said, "Please help us, Mrs. Nixon," in all the mailboxes of their neighbors. We like put it up on the like community billboard at their country club. And so they knew they were being targeted. They knew there was a media narrative that didn't know that it was about them. And they were like freaking out. And so this was building up to the main action day. So the main action day was, at this point, there were like a lot of interested people. And so there were a bunch of different local groups. And we had, at that point, we were just like, the sky's the limit with tactics. We were like, who's good at something we're not expecting? And someone was like, I do pirate radio. And we're like, cool, let's incorporate it. So we made recordings of women from the front lines telling their own stories themselves from Athabasca, Fort Chipewyan, in the tar sands, talking about how RBC was invested in the destruction of their communities and their livelihoods. And we put those on loop and broadcast them on public radio. We mapped out where all the employees of the headquarters of Royal Bank of Canada, where they commuted to work. And so on all the freeway overpasses on those commutes, we did banner drops that had a pirate radio station to tune into. And on that station was on loop these women telling their testimonials. And we have no way of measuring how many actual RBC employees tuned in, but we measured the aggregate, and it was tens of thousands of people listening to those stories on that morning. So then come about 8 o'clock, we had activists dressed in suits riding the elevators of the headquarters of Royal Bank of Canada and handing out flyers, but pretending to be other employees, handing out flyers to their coworkers. And so they would say things like, some activist on the street gave me this stack of flyers. Did you know that we were invested in this dirty project? I don't want to be invested in that. I don't feel good about working here. Do you? Here, do you want a flyer? And so just riding the escalators for hours doing that. And on all the flyers was like the big reveal. The big reveal was a website that was pleasehelpusmrsnixon.com. And on that website, before I say what's on the website, the major moment was Indigenous women scaled doing a technical banner hang, the gigantic flagpoles out front. And that's the banner that's on this image, which is... this is taken from a helicopter on the morning news. That's Heather Milton Lightning and Ariel Deranger, who are Indigenous Canadian women who have dropped this banner that said, please help us, mrsnixon.com. And on the website was a video from Rainforest Action Network's executive director making a heartfelt appeal to Janet Nixon, saying, Mrs. Nixon, we've spent so long trying to get the ear of your husband, and he just won't listen to us. We know you care so deeply about water and the environment that we think that you're in a position to help us. Will you talk to your husband tonight, Janet? And he's like sitting by the fireplace. There's like a puppy by his feet.
Aww.
There's like a picture of his family in the
Very
back.
appropriate.
And the mixture of different kinds of tactics, we made every major media outlet in the country on that day. And when I was doing security for that banner drop, and Gordon Nixon, who previously had not paid any attention to us at all, walked outside, didn't know that I was like doing action coordination, and he stood next to me. He looked at me and he looked at the banner and just pinches his nose and he goes, "Fuck!" And a custodial worker from the opposite building comes out and she's like, "I can't believe that like the Nixons showed their ass like this. They gotta be so embarrassed." And he looked at her and he looked at me and he just goes, "Fuck!" And after that, we had a fundamentally different power relationship with that company.
Right.
And we spent the next year, we still had a campaign. We didn't win the campaign from that one action.
Right.
But then when hereditary chiefs and other elders from that nation came to their shareholders meetings, for example, they were treated with respect and given a place. It was part of a media narrative that they wanted to build on. They were afraid of us. We got under his skin emotionally. We got under his skin personally. But then fundamentally, we didn't build a mass movement around this campaign at that point yet. And so we didn't grow our numbers, but we did flex our muscle in a way that was dangerous to their brand, which they protect and care about more than anything else. And they suddenly had to make a calculation of the viability of their brand as with their Blue Water Project and everything else. And were these investments worth that reputational risk to their brand? That was the power relationship that got changed. And that's the way that you can do this. I mean, what I've just described is like a multi-layered spectacle. That's all it is.
Yep.
It was we pulled it off with not that many people. It did require a lot of resources, but I forgot one part, and then I'm done. I know we're going late, which is that we also got all the emails to all of their executives. And when that video went up, we emailed our email list, which had several 100,000 people on it, and said, "Do you want to get involved in this fight? Email this video to the company executives." And we crashed their company intranet, and so they couldn't even function for the day because their internal servers got crashed, and that was more effective than a physical blockade.
Totally.
And so there's like a lot of lessons you can pull out of it, but there is a way that you can build a spectacle that changes your power relationship, that if you use it in the context of a campaign that is rooted in frontline advocacy, you can win, which eventually that campaign was really had like several different layers of success along the way.
That's awesome. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.